because they're just spreading disinformation about medicine, and they know they're spreading disinformation. They're fucking lying, and they know it. So that's infuriating.
Yeah, there are lots of charlatans out there. There's no doubt. Yeah,
charlatan. Wow.
I know. Look at that. That's my big word for the day.
Yeah, that is a big word. Hey everyone, I'm Mike.
And I'm Andrew.
And we're the Midlife guys. So Andrew, last week we started diving into the subject of building healthy habits in midlife. And
Yes.
I cited a paper that was published by Stanford University's School of Medicine that was published on January 7th, 2026. So this is brand new. And last week we talked about two of the 5 focus areas of that paper, which were prioritizing exercise and protecting muscle and bones, as well as eating a balanced diet. And this week, I want to dive into the last 3 recommendations. They include protecting your sleep and recovery, monitoring your health before problems arise, and managing stress and staying social. Are you ready to continue our discussion about building healthy habits after 40?
I am ready, although a quick note, if you haven't listened to last week's episode, go check that out real quick so you can get caught up on the full study in the first 2 parts. But yeah, let's get back at it.
All right. So we talked about the importance of sleep in a previous episode. So if you've not listened to that one, we will leave a link to it in the show notes. But one of the things that we didn't really dive into is ways in which you can monitor your sleep and improve your sleep, and ways that you can be proactive about your sleep health. So, first off, a startling fact is that nearly 1 billion with a B, people have sleep apnea or obstructed breathing as they sleep. Most people assume that this is a condition that only individuals who are overweight suffer from, but that's not true. As we age, the muscles around your airways can become weaker. We talked about the need to exercise, but most people don't realize that exercising also extends to the muscles around your neck, which are pretty important as well.
How do you exercise those muscles around your
Stretch.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Mm-hmm. Additionally, the lining of our nasal passages become weaker as we age, which is probably why we all hate the cold so much.
I know. I have a cold right now because of the
cold. These factors are why more and more people are suffering from challenging sleep, or they also are going undiagnosed with sleep apnea. They just don't even know it. They don't want to undergo surgery. They don't want to use a CPAP machine. They feel like there's a stigma behind all of that. There are other factors that are leading men and women over their 40s to have sleep problems, including high blood pressure, kids.
I can relate to that one.
Mm-hmm. Even your anatomy, which kind of hard to change unless you want to do a whole plastic surgery type of thing. But your anatomy actually does impact your sleep habits as well. So doctors recommend that everyone, and I do mean everyone, try to do at least one sleep test in their lives in order to ward off future complications. This is especially true when you start getting to a point where you're always fatigued when you wake up. Many of us, although not enough, get our blood pressure drawn on an annual basis to check on the factors that could impact health in the future, but we don't tend to monitor things when it comes to sleep. A lack of sleep factors can show up in blood results through higher cholesterol, but a doctor doesn't necessarily know if your higher cholesterol is because of your diet or it's because you're not getting any sleep. And why in the hell would anybody want to be on a medicine that they don't really need to be on if all of it boils down to the fact that you're just not getting enough sleep at night. So what do you think about that, Andrew?
I'm one of those people who've never had a sleep study. I'm kind of curious about that now. I get a physical every year, but I've not done a sleep study before. So maybe I'll add that to my 2026 bingo card. But I do think sleep in general is very, very important. I certainly agree with that. When I think about it, especially in midlife, I feel like not getting sleep definitely impacts me more than it did in the past. I feel like I drag for longer. I'm more irritable if I'm not sleeping on a consistent basis, and just feel fatigued. And I can relate to this recently because in the past week, my two kids have been taking turns once again getting up in the middle of the night, and sometimes both of them wanting to chip in getting up in the middle of the night. So neither my wife nor I have had like a really solid uninterrupted night's sleep for a couple of days, and the impact is real. Like it definitely does affect all other parts of your life. So I could certainly see the connection to your health, and it's definitely something that is really important to try to get more sleep or do a better job getting sleep. And it's actually interesting because I saw a bunch of news reports recently, probably in the last week or so, um, that had some fascinating studies that were showing that it's not just the amount of sleep that you get, but it's your sleep regularity that's really important, especially for brain health, like to counteract things like dementia and other sort of brain issues, or memory issues, especially. And so it's saying that you really need to fall asleep within a 30-minute window at least 5 days a week to have that sleep regularity to kind of counteract some of those other issues. So that's something I'm trying to work on too now, is not just trying to get sleep when I can, but going to bed at the same time each night to kind of help with creating that natural schedule and having the regularity. And so, for me, that's been trying to read a little bit more before bed, because less screens usually means I fall asleep quicker if I'm reading something for like half an hour, 45 minutes first. But I just thought that idea of the amount of sleep plus the regularity of when you sleep are really important factors, especially as we get older.
I think that's great. And I'm glad you brought that up, and especially trying to find a regular time in which to go to bed.
Yeah.
I know that's challenging sometimes with kids, and also just like, life stuff happens that you got to take care of. But
Yeah, and if I'm being honest, sometimes it's also just laziness on my part too, right? I'm like, oh, I want to watch another episode of whatever I'm like binging at the moment, or I don't really feel like going upstairs yet. And it's just kind of, again, getting into a good habit, right? Of like, okay, we're setting a bedtime that we're sticking with.
yes, even as
Yeah.
adults, we need a bedtime.
Yes.
So think about that, folks. Think about that, listeners. You need a bedtime.
Yeah.
Um, Sleep, especially in midlife, is just so important. As I mentioned in a previous episode, I have terrible environmental allergies. Um, that includes like dust mites and pollen and stuff like that. And I do my damnedest to try to keep everything in my home very, very clean. But there's some things that are just out of control out of my control when it comes to allergies. So that's why I started using a CPAP machine several years ago. It's made a significant impact in the quality of my sleep at night. Sometimes it's made it worse, but most of the time, it's made it better. Um, and I know this because I try to measure my sleep um, rhythm on my Apple Watch. I don't do it every night, but I try to do it at least a couple nights a week um, to really track where I am, REM cycles and stuff like that throughout the night. And I think that's important for us to be proactive about that type of thing. If we have, I know there are rings now that monitor stuff,
Oh
your
yeah.
sleep habits, and of course, I think Fitbits do it and Apple Watches do it. I think if we have access to technologies that can help us with this, I think that's important that we try to utilize them, just because it is so important. It I know we've talked about this before about the idea of really working on getting that 7 hours of sleep at night. Um, if we can do that, this will help protect us when we hit our 60s and 70s, especially with issues related to dementia and other cognitive decline. But now's the time to be proactive about this. And unfortunately,
Mm.
it's not something that anybody really pays attention to. I do think that we dive too quickly, and sometimes the medical profession does this, is they dive too quickly into prescribing a medicine when you don't really need a medicine, you just need a better night's sleep. Um, but what about you, listeners? How are you building good sleep habits, and what are you doing to ensure a good night's sleep?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in people's thoughts on sleep. That's something I'm still trying to work on. So, would love any advice or suggestions on getting a good night's sleep. One might be that I thought about recently was just locking the kids in their room so they can't get out. Is that an option? Anyone? No, I'm kidding. I'm not locking my children in their room at night. But seriously, any suggestions on better sleep? Would love to hear it.
Yes, please share your thoughts. So, the fourth recommendation in the Stanford paper was monitoring your health now before something arises. Our 40s and 50s are the years when signs for chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, cancers, um, others begin to develop. So, if you catch these things early and you start making lifestyle changes, you can ward off many of these diseases so you don't have to worry about them later in life. As we discussed last week, you need to spend more time in your golden years, your retirement years, enjoying yourselves, not worrying about chronic diseases or problems. The problem is that men and women in their 40s usually only get a checkup every 2 to 3 years. They do this because they don't feel like it's necessary and they only go to the doctor when they feel sick. Um, but the research is clear. Men and women in their 40s need annual checkups to test for things like colon cancer, which is steadily on the rise all across the world, which is terrifying. Um, Mammograms, blood tests, diabetes screenings. You don't have to have all of these things every year, but you definitely need to go and get a checkup every year. Um, Now, I know this is easy for me to say that, but there are a number of reasons why people also don't go to the doctor on an annual basis. Health insurance. Health insurance doesn't necessarily cover all of these screenings necessary to diagnose problems in the future. That's a problem. They may cover a visit to the primary care doctor, but that's about it. None of the screenings. Um, Second, a lot of people in their 40s just don't want to know. They feel fine. They things will be fine in the future. They don't want to be aware of any problems that may show up in the future. It's kind of this willful ignorance type of thing,
Yeah.
which is not
Ignorance
really great.
isn't always bliss. Yeah. Sometimes you need to know things.
No.
Yeah.
There's also a distrust in the medical community. Many individuals in their 40s and 50s are wary of physicians. I don't think this is new. People have been wary of physicians since the beginning of time. They don't necessarily trust what the medical community has to say, and they can feel like they can manage any issues that they may have. So, what do you think about taking care of your health before problems arise, Andrew? How have you made that part of your annual habits?
Yeah, I mean, I think being proactive is important. I will say I was in the camp in my 30s of never going to the doctor just because I think in my 30s I went once maybe for my annual physical because I was like, I feel fine. I'm young. I'm healthy. Why am I going to go? And it's not because, I mean, luckily my health insurance covered annual physicals and blood work and stuff like that. So it wasn't that. It was just laziness or kind of the somewhat willful ignorance piece. But it was, I think, especially being married to someone in healthcare. So my wife is a nurse. And when I turned 40, she was really like, no, you need to start going back and getting your annual physical to make sure everything's okay. And so I did start doing that again. And I know it kind of can seem like a pain or scheduling can seem challenging, trying to find the time or a right doctor to go to or whatnot. But it is important because you don't know what you don't know. And as you've talked about before, Mike, this isn't something you just want to kind of like cross your fingers, but hopefully we're going to be okay. Because if there are ways that you can be proactive to, prevent future issues, like I always think that's a better approach. And, I had a personal experience of this when I went and this when I was the most recent physical. So when I turned 41, got blood work drawn and it wasn't crazy high, but like my bad cholesterol. I know the doctor says there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So the bad one was like kind of high. It wasn't like super high, but it was elevated enough that he's like, oh, we should probably go back to listen to our other episode, like change your diet, think about how you're balancing it better. like cut out cheese and things like that, which made me very sad. But like really think about how you're eating, and I'm glad to have known that because I'd rather like make some adjustments now than, a number of years down the road, realize my cholesterol is like way off the charts and that's impacting other parts of my health, or I'm on a bunch of funky medicine that, isn't always the best to be on, or isn't maybe helps the cholesterol, but can impact other things. So I think it's just a matter of, knowing in advance is not a good thing. So, or is a good thing rather. It's good to know these things up front and try to be proactive. So for those who haven't gone in a while, it's worth doing it. Find a time to go, get checked out. It's always better to have information that you can figure out how to use it.
I agree. Um, a doctor can tell you the facts, but you're the one that's got to walk the walk.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's important. I mean, that's definitely my experience. Going for my annual checkup has become a habit for me. I
Yep.
appreciate that, go through, I first go and do all the diagnostic tests to make sure that everything's moving in the right direction, the blood test. And then I have a follow-up appointment with the doctor to go over the test results and say like, all right, here's what it says. Here are the adjustments that I recommend you making. Um, you know, and this has just become a part of my life. Essentially, it's
It's just
just
what you do, right?
it's just what you do. It's it's
Yeah.
essentially like it's no different than renewing my annual auto insurance policy. Really, these checkups are insurance for my future,
Yeah.
so that I can stop any problems before they arise.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to sit there and fucking end up in some dying in some hospital bed and God knows where, well, over something that I could have easily fixed. So,
Right. Or just having
y-
to manage something that snowballs into something bigger because you didn't, get it early enough. And you made a good point about the idea of like, you've got to walk the walk. And that's true that us as individuals all have to make decisions and we have agency to do what we want to do and whatnot. But, that idea also makes me think of like, but you need to at least have some like map of where you're going, right? Or directions. Like you need the information about like, am I going on the right journey? Am I walking in circles? Am I going backwards? Like, I mean, I just feel like it's kind of hard to even use that agency or make those decisions if you don't have some information to go by.
I 100% agree with you, and I think that is the big takeaway for
Yeah.
me, out of this particular recommendation from the Stanford paper is that like if so many of us are not just doing an annual checkup, that takes an hour out of a day,
One time a year.
one time a fucking year,
Yeah.
then you're just making an incredibly big mistake
Yeah.
because, you know, it may show up in your blood test that you are perfectly fine and that what you're doing is working out perfectly. Um, and that's great. I'm thrilled for you if that's the case. But if there's just like the smallest change that you need to make, um, you know, these things snowball as you get
Yeah.
older. They just snowball. And so it's really important that we make going to the doctor and doing the diagnostic stuff and doing all of these the screening tests just part of our habits, that they're part of our daily routine.
Yep.
Um, you know, and I understand um I understand a lot of the stuff as to why people either can't do it because of health insurance. Health insurance in the United States is a fucking joke. Um,
The whole healthcare system's kind of a mess, for being
the whole
honest.
healthcare system's a fucking joke.
Yeah.
Um, and I understand that mentality of people feeling like, because I know a lot of people like this, like, I feel fine. And I'm like, well,
Right.
go anyway. I
You
will
feel fine until
say,
you don't, and then all of a sudden, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I do have a problem with all of these, you know, social media doctors essentially, or people that think that they do I do my own research type of crowd, because they're just spreading disinformation about medicine and they know they're spreading disinformation. They're fucking lying and they know it. So that's infuriating.
Yeah. There are lots of charlatans out there. That is no doubt. Yeah.
Charlatan. Wow.
I know. Look at that. That's my big word for the day.
Yeah, that is a big word for the day.
I will say this is a good point to just do our quick disclaimer that we did in our first episode, but not this one, which is that just if you haven't picked up on this yet, Mike and I are not doctors. So like we're just sharing our experiences about health issues. If you actually do have health concerns, you should talk to a doctor who's actually licensed and is a real doctor to do that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Go see your doctor. Go see a doctor. Someone who is licensed. Someone who has an accredited degree. Usually multiple degrees from an accredited medical school. Reminds me of like the fake doctor from The Simpsons. Not that guy, because there are plenty of those guys around.
Yeah, there are.
But just, I implore all of our listeners, get your annual checkup. Make it a habit. Get checked for everything that you need to be checked for. And tell your doctor, this is a really important part too. Tell your doctor about family histories.
Yeah.
So if your mother or grandmother, had an issue with high blood pressure or high cholesterol, whatever it may be, those things, I mean, we're the product of our parents and our grandparents. So those things can show up in you. And so it's important that your doctor is aware of your family medical history too.
Yeah.
And yet again, these are ways that we can be proactive about having a better future if we're proactive about our health right now.
Yep.
And while you're at it, make sure you go to the fucking dentist and go to the dentist twice a year.
And the eye doctor too. We're getting older now.
And the eye doctor.
All the doctors.
I know. I have an eye doctor appointment tomorrow. I'm sure I'll be walking away with glasses. So it'll be fun. So what about you, listeners? Do you go to the doctor every year for a checkup? Why or why not? Please leave your thoughts. So Andrew, final recommendation from this paper: stress management and staying social. So chronic stress can weaken your immune system, damage your cardiovascular system, and accelerate cognitive decline. We've talked a lot on this show about how midlifers face a lot of stress, especially right now. The balance between kids and work and parents and money can be overwhelming. Men and women in their 40s and 50s are open to doing things like therapy, meditation, and other ways to help with their stress. The challenge is most of them don't actually do it, though, because of time constraints. The same is true with social interactions. But here's the thing, especially on the social side. Social isolation increases premature death by 30%, which is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So, as we've discussed in previous episodes, a lot of midlifers really struggle with social isolation because, again, they feel like they just don't have time. These are major red flags within the health community because they're seeing troubling signs among men and women in their 40s and 50s who are significantly more stressed and more socially isolated than previous generations. What is more interesting, though, is that this particular factor seems to be very limited to the United States alone. Other countries, including Canada, Australia, France, Spain, everywhere else, people in their 40s and 50s are less stressed, and they have much higher social interactions with their peers and friends. So this is clearly a U.S. problem, which is terrifying. But what do you think, Andrew? How are you making stress management and social interaction a normal habit?
A normal habit, yeah. I mean, this is, I think, a hard one because, as we've talked about in previous episodes, like stress is real, and I think midlifers, and maybe particularly in the United States, it seems like have a lot of different stresses on them. I mean, I can tell you, this past week, I'm trying to figure out, well, my wife and I are trying to figure out like summer camps for 2 kids, and we just got our heating bill for after again this like Arctic freeze, and like I'm about to lose my stress or my like mind off of stress. It's just like there's a lot that goes on, and so I mean, I think it's trying to get through the day and manage it and acknowledge that the stress is there. I mean, I think some days are more stressful than others, but there's always at least like a baseline of stress that I think kind of exists, especially for midlifers. I do think, as you talked about, Mike, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. It seems very logical that there is a direct relationship between level of stress and social isolation as well. Because if you're dealing with all these pressures and then you're isolated on top of that, I feel like it would just compound you if you don't have other people to try to, lean on or to share that with or to interact with or to have, positive experiences to balance out the stressful experiences. Like it would just feel kind of suffocating, I would think, after a while. So, I mean, I think that trying to address both stress for sure, but also the social isolation piece is really, really important. And I think it's something, Freeman mentioned a couple weeks ago about this idea of like people kind of have forgotten social skills, right? We kind of forget after COVID and all how to interact with one another. And so I think that's something we've got to work on is how do we get better social skills? I mean, humans are social animals. I think we're supposed to be around other people and interacting with other people and spending time with them. I know one thing I've tried to do recently is once a week, which doesn't seem that difficult to me at least, to text someone I haven't talked to in a while. So it's a friend, a former classmate, maybe a colleague, a neighbor, whomever, just like say hi, how's it going? And if we're like in the same general area, maybe see if they want to try to meet up in person to just, catch up or whatnot. And so I think like
That's
even little,
wonderful.
yeah, like little things like that, I think can help too, right? Just like pick a person and, so far I've had some responses from folks and not from others, and that's fine. It's not a big deal. Like I'll just keep trying it though, because I think trying to get out there and be social is really important, especially to try to counteract the stress piece, because I do think that stress underpins a lot of the other health effects, especially in midlife, because it does feel like it ramps up a lot. The stress does, at least.
Yes, 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
Um, for me, I of course deal with stress as well. But I try to stay ahead of it by staying very organized.
Mm.
So I write down 5 to 10 things that I want to accomplish in any given day. And Andrew and I actually share a list of those things because they include work stuff,
Yeah.
life stuff. And so we kind of encourage each other by doing that. I find this technique to be incredibly motivating, and it helps ward off stress for me because I can, go through that list and, of course, there's going to be things that pop up, but I personally find that to be a great way to just manage stress by staying focused on that list, but also leaving some room for flexibility. Um, in terms of the social side of things, I do try to we've talked about this before, but I try to stay in touch with friends as much as possible. I have not always done a good job about that with like family members, especially family members that don't live locally. So I'm trying to do a lot better job about that
That's a good
this
point
year.
too. It's a whole group. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I wanted to, so that's something that I'm really working on. Um, I wasn't always this way. There was yet again, as I mentioned in the previous episode, when Andrew and I were first building our company, it was a pretty dark time for me, and so I quickly learned though that I needed to by being more caring, empathetic, going out and actually socializing with people that helped lift my mood quite a bit. Um, and so, like today, I host lots of parties and get togethers and cocktails. And I love to travel with friends and family. In fact, heading on a trip in a couple of weeks. So, with friends and family. So, I'm very, I try to really stay on top of that. Um, just calling people, just texting people.
Yeah.
To Andrew's point, the key is not to be shy. You just can't be shy. You got to be outgoing. It's about us connecting with as many people as possible as you can, because you know there's a lot of folks out there in the world that could add a lot of meaning to your life. So it
Yeah,
doesn't
but I
hurt
think
to reach
it is
out.
important to connect to as many people as possible, but I think for some folks too, that can feel kind of overwhelming or like a lot. So maybe
Yeah,
again, start with like a couple people, maybe some friends or family members that you haven't talked to in a little bit, and just make a list of who they are, and one by one, just reach out to them every now and then, try to start up a conversation. I just think anything we can do to be more social or interact with one another is valuable.
I agree. But what about you listeners?
Yeah.
How have you managed your stress? What have you done to be more sociable? Please let us know in the comments. Share your feedback with us. And with that, I want to thank you all for being part of this 2-part episode about building healthy habits. Share your thoughts, comments, experiences about all the 5 focus areas out of this paper. We want to hear from you. As I mentioned last week, your comments, your feedback, especially the positive experiences that you've had in building healthy habits may work for someone else who reads those comments. And so you never know whose life you may improve by sharing your positive stories as well. We want this to be a community where midlifers can share their ideas and stories because we aren't alone. We're all experiencing many of the same challenges. In the meantime, also want to hear how you all are going to build healthy habits around the recommendations that we've discussed. And if there's certain things that we discussed that you're like, oh, I should really think about going to the doctor more often, or, creating a bedtime for myself. We would love to hear that. So be sure to tune in and tell your friends. If you've not done so already, please like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you a thing, but it helps us a lot. Remember that you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartMedia, and all your favorite podcast platforms. And until next week, good luck, guys.
Thanks, everybody.